Well, firstly, Happy New Year! Happy New Year! I'm just so excited. This is really truly for the church beginning of the new year. We just turned the corner and we started a whole new cycle of readings. And so we start our Advent Ushers lesson this new year with readings from Luke. And so we've heard from Luke, and isn't Luke inspiring? He's talking about the end of the world. And it's so interesting because as we go on with Luke through our Advent, then we kind of go backward with this weird moonwalk liturgically. Because I can't do that very well there. But we do this interesting thing because as he starts out with the end of the world, we heard that. And then it's going to back up in time as we go forward, because the next couple of weekends we're going to hear about John the Baptist and what was going on for him, kind of the pre-announcer to Christ. And then it goes even more back into time as we move forward by giving us the canticle of Mary and a conversation between Elizabeth and Mary before these guys are even born, before John the Baptist and Jesus are even with us. And then finally we get to Christmas, and we have his birth. So something very interesting is going on retrograde in terms of what we're hearing about throughout Advent. So it's interesting that it starts with images and foretelling and warnings about the nature of destruction. And that somehow, even when we start seeing those first things in our lives or in the world around us, in which would cause us to completely become disheartened, we get the message, that's just kind of the first glimmerings of a great greening that's going to come. That stuff that looks and feels like, and in very real ways is death-like. It's not the end there. There is a very real something next. Now, this is sort of one of the gifts of many, but one of the promises of Advent that's being brought to our attention is the promise of the impossible. The absolute promise God makes to us that even when we are living within our mortal limitations, our limitations of vision, our limitation of understanding, the limitation that grief can put upon our hearts, the limitation that despair for the future can bring to our vision for it. Even when we are living in the midst of those experiences, God gives us the promise of impossibility. And in fact, it's Alton that says something that's possible can't save us from that precipice. Something that's possible can't save us. We, who are about to die, demand a miracle, says Alton. And that's the promise of that impossible save that we have in Advent. And we get the first story about that in the history of our faith. When we hear from the prophet Jeremiah in that Old Testament reading, Jeremiah, he is prophesying that the lineage of David will rise again in a whole new, unimaginable, impossible way. Why is it feeling impossible to people of his time? Why are they going, what the heck are you talking about, you crazy person? They're saying that to him. There's no promise. They say that to him. That's not going to happen. It's impossible. Because the Assyrians are a powerful empire, and they live to the north of us, and they could get rid of us in an instant. Little Judah here. And then, if it's not bad enough that we have the Assyrians to the north of us, who are a huge kingdom, taking over everybody, we've got the Egyptians, a well-established empire, to our west, and to our east, and to our south. And so they are surrounded by people who could snuff them out. And here is Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah is a prophet under 3 different kings of Judah. And the first one, Hosea, here he is, Hosea, launching quite foolishly into conflict with the Egyptians. And Jeremiah says, don't do that. Don't do that. But his word is not heeded by Josiah, and bad things happen. Then the next guy comes along, and Jeremiah says to the next king, who is, let's see, did you get my class note? Joachim. Joachim is next, and Joachim has a little bit of problem keeping the central identity of the Jewish people in the midst of so much diversity and pressure going on in terms of their faith and what makes them unique in that diverse world. And Jeremiah says, don't let these other cultures and belief systems subsume ours. Don't do it. But he does. Okay? And then finally we get to the king Zedekiah. And Zedekiah wants to launch into battle with the very powerful Assyrians and the Babylonians, and especially the Babylonians. And Jeremiah says, don't enter conflict with the Babylonians. We might need them. We might need them later. But Zedekiah does. And he loses an ally because eventually the Assyrians are overthrown with the help of the Babylonians. Okay? So what happens is the new conquerors basically kick out Judah and everybody in, including Jeremiah, and then exile them to Egypt. So it's not good. And here, in the midst of these horrific experiences, being displaced, having their identity completely challenged, being smoked, and everybody there is to be smoked, Jeremiah is saying, we're going to rise again. A new king will come to us. We will rise again and be a powerful nation. A nation with cohesive identity and loving God. All right. Nobody listens to me all the way along. And here we have in the New Testament this audacious promise again that even in the midst of Jesus' apparent death, real death, but apparent unsurvivability, there is something amazing and ridiculous that is promised out of that, in the face of that. And for the first century Christian church, it was a ridiculous thing to preach. It was ridiculous in people's ears to walk around and say, God is not this huge, vast, punishing thing that is going to zap you like a piece of bacon if you fail in the law. The new faith under Jesus' teachings is saying, you're beloved. Your sins will be forgiven. You are continuously invited into an intimate relationship with God, who wants to be with you. Look, I'm here, says Jesus. I want to be with you. God is Emmanuel, God with us. You're not alone. Even in the face of empire, even in the face of losing everything you love, losing occupation, losing people you love, standing on the precipice of loss and death, we are invited into an outrageous and ridiculous faith in the promise of the impossible. So this Advent, I encourage you to walk, knowing that in the waiting of this time with Mary, who's been told impossible things by an impossible being, that all things impossible are part of the choices that we can make every day. Advent as a new beginning reminds us that every moment of our life, every day, every interaction we have a spectrum of choices about how that's going to go. And we have the power to make a different choice, a new choice, a choice that's life-giving. And even in the midst of fear about those choices, we are encouraged to choose the impossible. Because like Dumbledore and Harry Potter, you read that, right? And you did. There is this moment when Harry's dead, right? And he goes to King's Cross Station in the sky. And it's all illuminated and light. And he's had this amazing conversation with Dumbledore, who's already dead. And he's encountered him in this place. And he says, excuse me, Professor, before you go, and before I go apparently, what is this place? Is it real? Or is it just in my mind? And Dumbledore turns around and says, well, Harry, of course it's in your mind. But why does that necessarily mean it's not real? We are invited to the faith of Christ, who says there is something real is the promise of the apostle and his advent.